Hi, my name is Sophie and welcome back to my channel. I feel like I should make a comment about how consistent or not consistent I've been in January, but I also can't really remember. I've definitely not made as many videos as I planned to make, but you know, we're riding the wave, we're doing what we can. It was a busy month, a lot happened. We're just doing what we can, and by we, I mean me. So, as January has come to an end, it's time to tell you about the books I read this month. I managed to finish 5 books this month. I got to 87% of a 6th book, and I'm a little bit salty that I didn't quite have enough time to finish it, but that's not the point. So 5.87 books finished in January. So I'm going to tell you about the 5 I did finish and let you know how well I did on my monthly TBR. The first book I finished was actually the one that I was reading over Christmas and didn't quite finish in time for the new year, and that was Love Life Farms by B.K. Borison. I rated this 3.5. I thought it was fine. I was generally enjoying it, but in the third act, I found the FMC became completely unbearable because the third act conflict was just completely unnecessary and came out of nowhere. Everything was going really smoothly, and then arguably it was written as miscommunication, but it wasn't miscommunication. It was just her being stubborn and awkward. And if I was the main male character, I'd have run, because he was being so explicit and communicating so well everything he wanted. And then this girl was like pretending she couldn't hear, or she just clearly didn't have a brain. If I was him, I'd have run for the hills. So that really annoyed me, and I was really hoping I'd like this book more than I did, because I really wanted to read the series and love it as much as other people did. But I'm not sure, bearing in mind that's how I felt about this book. I need someone who's read the series to tell me whether I will get annoyed with the rest of the series for the same reason, or whether the rest of the series is different. I don't know, but for now, not rushing to buy whatever book 2 is. Is book 2 in the weeds? Yeah, that was Love Life Farms. Oh, book summary. Okay. There's a girl called Stella who has bought a Christmas tree farm, and the Christmas tree farm's not doing particularly well, so she enters a contest with an Instagram influencer who does travel and stuff and turns it into a kind of pretentious storytelling thing. And she gets selected to be a finalist, and the influencer is going to come visit the farm. So she's getting the farm ready. There's someone causing damage to the farm, and she also lied in her application that she bought the farm with her boyfriend, who doesn't exist. So she ropes in her best friend, Luca, who pretends to be the boyfriend. And that's about it. The other thing that gave me the ick with this book is that Luca has a nickname for Stella where he calls her Lala. And for me, I'm not sure how you're getting Lala from Stella, because, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right as a pronunciation thing. But also, every time he said it, I thought of the yellow Teletubby. And that does not feel like a good nickname to me. So 3.5, probably won't continue the series, but I am interested in B.K. Borison's new release. What's it called? One Time Caller? That looks really good, so I can't promise I won't be buying that. Moving swiftly on to what I call the rock bottom of January. This year, my sibling and I decided to start a new book club. And by new book club, it's more like buddy reading. We're just picking a book that we both read, and then we'll have a little chat about it. So the first book we picked was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. We chose this on a lovely day out in London where we went to Forbidden Planet, and we chose the first book together, and I was very excited to read this. The summary reads, in a famine-stricken village, a seer shows 2 children their futures. For the boy there's greatness, for the girl nothingness. But China in 1345 lies under harsh Mongol rule, and the other villagers can't imagine how the boy, Zhu Xiongba, might find success. And indeed, when bandits seize the village, Zhu Xiongba dies. Desperate to survive, the girl steals her brother's identity to enter a monastery. There, Zhu learns to be ruthless to avoid her fated death. But when her sanctuary is destroyed by war, Zhu is cast back into the world. To stay alive, she must claim her brother's great destiny as her own and rise as high as she can dream. Sounds like a fun concept, right? Except it wasn't. I didn't feel attached to these characters in any way, shape or form. They felt incredibly bland. There wasn't really a plot other than Zhu, this girl who'd stolen her brother's identity. I can't even remember the girl's actual name, because I don't know how she remembers it, because she goes by her brother's name forever. the whole plot is basically her trying to fulfill this future, even though it's not like a prophecy, futures can change. It's not like it's set in stone. But she goes chasing this future, and spoiler alert, I would feel bad about spoiling it, but I don't. But she just starts killing everyone in a way to gain everyone's power. And it's just like, there's no need for this. Like, if it is a prophecy, if it is fate, then you will achieve greatness without going out of your way to kill anyone. And it just felt really unhinged. I didn't really get it. It was a 1.5 for me. Normally when I'm rating books that low, a 2-star book for me is a book that I didn't enjoy, but I can appreciate the writing isn't technically bad. It's just that it wasn't for me and I didn't enjoy it. But then a 1-star read is a book that I think objectively is badly written. And this straddles the line between, I really don't know if it's good writing, because all of the reviews I read on Storygraph were really highly rating this book, but I couldn't relate to any of them. So I gave it 1.5 because I couldn't figure out where it sat between those two ratings for me. We won't be reading the next book in the series. My sibling felt much the same as I did. And the other thing is, there was one really uncomfortable sex scene. And when I was writing my review in my book journal, the last thing I wrote was, and don't even get me started on the fisting. That's where I will leave it. That's all I will say. Then on to my third book of the month, I read Maximum Ride, The Angel Experiment by James Patterson. This is a book or a book series that I loved when I was a teenager. And when I first got back into reading, I put it on my unread TBR because I wanted to reread it. So I can, in terms of my statistics and my spreadsheets and stuff, it's counting as my unread physical TBR, even though I have read it before. This book is on my 25 in 2025, so that's the reason I chose to read it this month. And even though is it over 500 pages long? I think it might be. No, 460-ish. I flew through this. I've not had a higher page per hour ratio, I think, on any book ever. For some reason, I managed to read about 100 pages an hour with this book, and I've never read that fast in my life. This book is so fast-paced, and it made me feel so nostalgic. I started reading it whilst I was in bed, and my husband was next to me, and I kept going, oh, I forgot about this character. Oh, I forgot about this thing. Oh, I love this. I felt so nostalgic about the whole thing, and I absolutely adored it. I'm hoping to read the second book in the series. It's on my February TBR, but I've put it right at the end because I want to prioritise the other things on my February TBR first. But I'm so excited to be back in this universe, and I'm so glad I decided to put this on my unread TBR so that it went into my TBR jar. It came out of the TBR jar and went on my 25 and 2025, and then it was picked in the first month of the year. That's what I needed after a couple of duds. I needed a 5-star read. I rated it 5 stars, absolutely adored it. It's very 2007 or 2006, whenever it came out. But we can't hold that against it because that is when it was released. So it's a bit cringy in places, but the nostalgia wins out on everything. I loved this, and I cannot wait to read more of the series. And from there, we continued in the reread territory because it was approaching the time of month where Onyx Storm was coming out. So I started my Fourth Wing reread. I reread Fourth Wing. I listened to the audiobook this time. First time I read it purely with my eyes. And this time I listened to the standard audiobook, not the graphic one. I'll explain more of that later. Oh, book summaries. Oh, why am I so bad at this? Basically, the premise of this book is that there are 6 kids who were brought up in a scientific lab because they've been genetically experimented on, and they are 2% bird. They all have wings and they can all fly. And I think 6 years before the start of this book, they escaped from the school, which is what they call the lab, and they set up a life for themselves with one of the scientists. And then 2 years before the story starts, that scientist disappears. They all assume he's dead, but they've been living on their own, a bunch of kids, unsupervised, in the forest. Then a species of essentially like guard werewolf genetic experiments come to try and find them again, and they kidnap the youngest of the flock, as they call themselves, Angel, and then they have to go save her. and it's a really, really sweet story. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Fourth Wing. Summary of Fourth Wing. Violet Sorrengail is the daughter of the General of Basgiath War College, and her mother is a dragon rider, and although she was brought up to be a scribe because she has what is not named but is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so she has a connective tissue disorder, she is physically disabled, her mum makes her go into the Riders Quadrant. So she's forced into this quadrant where she's barely physically strong enough to survive, and everyone wants to kill her because of her mother, but they're sassy dragons. I've summarised that incredibly poorly, but I think if you're on TikTok, you're familiar with Fourth Wing anyway. I reread a Fourth Wing. I listen to the audiobook rather than reading it purely with my eyes, and the audiobook's nothing to write home about. I think the narrator, the voice actor, did a good job with what she was presented with, which was having to play both a 20-year-old girl, a 22-year-old, what would we call him? A dark-wielding shadow man, and also the biggest, scariest dragon at the college. So, she does a good job, not groundbreaking, But yeah, I really enjoyed this reread, even though when I first read Fourth Wing, I rated it 5 stars, mostly because I felt like I had to. My husband had read it and absolutely adored it, and at the time I wasn't doing half-star ratings, so it felt like I did enjoy it, but realistically I should have given it a 4-star because I found some of the dialogue incredibly cringy. I found Violet a bit obvious in terms of protagonists. She was very much not like other girls whilst also being very much like other girls, and it felt very nostalgic for all the kind of fantasy books that were popular when I was a teenager, but not quite as good. But on reread, I think it's easier to ignore the things that you don't enjoy when you're rereading something, and then you can focus in on the details that you maybe didn't pick up on the first time, or because you know how it ends, you can look out for things that are drip fed to you throughout the book. And I enjoyed it more because of that. So even though I'm rating it lower, I rated it 4.5, I actually enjoyed it more. And then, very obviously, after Fourth Wing, I reread Iron Flame. I have never read this physical edition. This is the one that my husband read. I read it on my Kindle because that's too big for my teeny tiny hands. I don't have teeny tiny hands. I'm 5'10", but either way, that is too heavy. I read it on my Kindle. And even then, I also listened to this one with an audiobook. But for this one, I listened to the graphic audiobook. For one, I think that's a terrible name because it sounds much more erotic than it actually is. But what a graphic audiobook actually is, if you're not familiar, is a step up from a full cast audiobook in that it has sound effects and music, and it's essentially like listening to a film if a film was 21 hours long. There were 2 reasons I chose this. One, because I wanted to experience the graphic audio book. I don't know why that took me so long to say. And 2, because I only started rereading this the day before Onyx Storm came out, because these rereads took me longer than anticipated. And the graphic audiobook is 7 hours shorter than the standard audiobook. So even though, the other reason I was hesitant about reading the graphic audios and why I didn't read the graphic audio for Fourth Wing is that they're split into 2 parts. So I would have had to use 2 credits on whatever audiobook app I was redeeming them on. So I didn't do it for Fourth Wing, but I had the credits and I needed the time saver for Iron Flame. So I used them for Iron Flame. And the other thing I didn't love about the graphic audio is that because it's 7 hours shorter, it's technically listed as unabridged, but they've cut out 7 hours worth of stuff. In some instances, it's things like, instead of saying she sighed, the voice actor will just sigh. So rather than performing the action and then saying it, they just perform it. So there's stuff like that, but then there's also bits where some description is left out and things are muddled around in a slightly different order. So I couldn't really co-read this book because what was happening in my ears was not exactly the same as what was happening on page / on the screen of my Kindle. So that was slightly more complicated than, well, it wasn't complicated. I made it more complicated than it needed to be. But all that aside, the actual book itself, the actual reread, I had a wonderful time. Initially, when I read Iron Flame on its release in 2023, I rated it 4 stars. I know a lot of people were disappointed with Iron Flame, and I think I was kind of the same because it did feel rushed, it did feel long, but having reread it, it's so much more enjoyable the second time round because, again, I could ignore the bits of cringy dialogue I didn't like, and I could pick up on all the nuances and the details, and actually on reread, it doesn't feel too long. All the details are there. The character tension is there. The character development is there. I think it's got some of the best world building I've ever read. I don't know what it is, but I can just imagine it so vividly, and it feels so real in the way that a Dragon War College can feel real. But I do imagine it really, really vividly. So that was developed and built on so much and so well. I loved it. I also rated it 4.5. So whilst my rating of Fourth Wing went down by half a star, my rating of Iron Flame went up by half a star. I had a fabulous time, and I'm already excited for whenever book 4 comes out. I'm going to reread the whole thing again, and I can't wait. And that was the last book I finished in January. I did start reading Onyx Storm, but like I said, I got 87% of the way through it, so I didn't quite finish it in January. I did finish it on February 1st. At this point in time of recording, I have finished it, but, building up that suspense. I mean, you could go look at my story graph to see what I rated it, and I'm about to post an Instagram review, but I'll leave the YouTube review for the February wrap-up. And my February TBR is now about 8 books long, not including Onyx Storm that I just finished. So if I manage to get through my monthly TBR this month, I will have read 9 books. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's everything I read in February. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're reading a great book, and I'll see you next time for another bookish video. Bye!